Please listen carefully to the information presented. Some of it may seem alarming, but these are trends, and the beauty of trends is that they can be altered by our own actions. So we ask you to act now and share this information with others. Please get involved and visit our website for all the handouts and how you can take the next step. To learn more about the information presented at the Economic Summit, visit the Cape Cod Chamber website at ecapechamber.com and click on our resource directory. Get involved in your town's financial well-being and share this information with others. The economic health of our children's future is at stake.
Paul is no stranger to the Cape, certainly, and he studied at Suffolk University, both undergraduate and in their law school, is a Marine, was Chief of Staff for Henri Rauschenbach when he was in the Senate, was also, and I didn't know this, an Assistant District Attorney and Chief Financial Officer for Michael O'Keefe's District Attorney's Office, which I think is a very interesting perspective. And for the last 3.5 years, served as the Assistant Town Administrator in the town of Barnstable under John Klim, and has done some wonderful things in the town of Barnstable cooperatively with the Cape Cod Commission. So, without further ado, please welcome John Niedzwiecki. Paul Niedzwiecki, I'm sorry. There's an old friend of mine, John Niedzwiecki, who was from Barnstable, and I knew I was going to do that, but my apologies, Paul.
Thank you, Dick. Well, my name is Paul Niedzwiecki, and I am your friendly neighborhood executive director of the Cape Cod Commission, expressing my preference for Spider-Man instead of Superman. I'm glad Douglas stayed, although he got to speak when people's eyeballs were frozen open upstairs, and I get to speak during nap time. And Douglas, by the way, there are strip malls in Mashpee, too.
I didn't build them.
No, but they're there. And I do like the fact that you read Superman comic books, but I like even more the fact that Stu Bornstein reads Douglas Storrs comic books. That's all good. I'm glad to be here today. I was glad to be at the forum and listen to the speaker this morning. It reminded me when I was with Henri as his chief of staff, we sat on the conference committee, the state conference committee, the state budget, which was at the time was $21 billion. And what they would do, we were only 6 of us in the room, and prior to that, they'd bring us to the Federal Reserve in Boston. And so you go into the big Federal Reserve, and you become very intimidated. They take us to the giant conference room on the top with these huge paintings, and you overlook Boston Harbor, Logan Airport. And they sit up with the biggest conference table I've ever seen. They sit the Ways and Means staff and the conferees on the other side. And they have 3 economists sit there and tell you their outlook for the Massachusetts economy. And they're all different. It's very difficult. And I think I mention that because economic development is difficult, especially when it involves gazing into a crystal ball. And it can always be dangerous, too. But economic development on Cape Cod is about our quality of life, and I think that is sort of an indisputable fact, and we need to focus on that. I've talked to a lot of people in my new capacity about economic development, the Cape Cod Commission's role in economic development. And I think there are some who believe that that was just a misprint in the Act and that we have no role in it at all. I disagree with that. But what I do think is fundamental for all of us who play a role in economic development on the Cape is to figure out our roles and responsibilities, and to do that clearly. And the Cape Cod Chamber needs to do that, individual chambers, and other folks that are involved in this. We need to figure out what our roles and responsibilities are in order to collaborate and work responsibly to make sure that we do all that we can do here. So, to the extent that economic development is quality of life, the Cape Cod Commission's role is really to protect those resources that support that quality of life here. And in a general sense, that's what we try to do. That is why the Cape Cod Commission Act exists. And I believe that Cape Cod needs the Cape Cod Commission Act as much now as it ever has. And I think we heard a lot of the reasons why upstairs this morning. Part of the other reason for the creation of the Cape Cod Commission Act is that the Cape, on the Cape, we're limited. We're here because of the special quality of life, but there are certainly many limitations. And the population on Cape Cod has doubled, at least, since the late 60s. But we are limited based on what we can do with our wastewater. We have no outfall pipe options. Looking at it a good steam when I say that. Like Boston does. We live on a sandy peninsula. It's a sole source aquifer with different lenses. We have to be careful about what we put into the ground if we want to be able to take out stuff that makes sense. So we are limited there, and we are significantly limited as it relates to traffic. We have a canal. We basically live on an island, and there are two bridges, two ways to get on and to get off, and that is a limiting factor when it comes to economic development. So we have to be sensible around that, and we have to be realistic about how we try to sort of focus on things. But from the Commission's perspective, I believe the biggest challenge for the Cape over the next 25 years really involves infrastructure. And maybe that's my municipal perspective coming through. But we are struggling with the infrastructure that we have, struggling to accommodate the growth, and primarily the residential growth that we've seen over the last 30 years. And so in order to do that, we're going to have to look at roads and wastewater and other issues like that. And it becomes an exercise in planning. And quite often, the Cape Cod Commission, I think, recently has been criticized for our regulatory role. And my goal as executive director is to make sure that this agency is as much a proactive planning agency as well as a reactive regulatory agency. So globally on economic development, how do we do that? First of all, we have to review our regulations and make sure that they don't provide disincentives for appropriate development. And that is a key thing. We also, I think, need to look at our regulations as ways they may provide incentives for appropriate development. And Douglas and I actually agree on a lot more than we disagree. And part of the way that we can sort of focus growth into areas that we need to and must is through that kind of incentive-laden approach, and just not allow it in other places. What I can report to you is that the 21st Century Task Force report was completed almost a year ago, and staff has been hard at work on that, as well as the Planning Committee and the Executive Committee and the Regulatory Committee of the Cape Cod Commission. I was shocked by the amount of work that they've done in the last 12 months. They have really sort of burrowed down into the details of these recommendations of this task force. And so what you will be seeing from us over the next 12 months are an attempt to sort of roll out and implement some of these task force recommendations. And I think it will be an easier discussion because of the way that we're going to present it, because it is going to be map-based. We have worked with most of the 15 communities already to establish a map on Cape Cod that shows where we have areas that are underdeveloped, that sit on existing infrastructure, where we have areas that would be preferable to redevelop, and potentially areas where new infrastructure would be appropriate. And these are the areas that Douglas talks about, and these are the conversations that we need to have with individual communities, and we need to plan for that, and we need to do that in a map-based way. Because when we do that, and that is not going to be an easy job, but when we do that and we arrive on these maps, then we can talk about things like threshold flexibility. If the lasting impact of the Cape Cod Commission is that every CBS on Cape Cod is 9,999 square feet, then we have failed. So the good thing about the 10,000 square foot threshold Cape-wide is that it's easy to understand. The bad thing is it's one size fits all, and it really doesn't work anymore. And we need to look at threshold flexibility and having different review thresholds in different parts of the Cape and in different parts of individual towns. So threshold flexibility has to be something that we're willing to discuss. It's going to force us to become more sophisticated, and we are going to need some help and some assistance in doing that. The advantage to threshold flexibility is that it doesn't require a town meeting vote. So some of the frustrations that were expressed upstairs over local government would not apply as it relates to thresholds. But that doesn't mean that we can act unilaterally, and we will not. We will act only in participation and cooperation with the 15 municipalities. We have to. Those are the local political structures, and have a tremendous amount of respect for them. I've spent a lot of time in my first 5 or 6 weeks here referring to the Cape as the Upper Cape, the Mid Cape, the Lower Cape, the Outer Cape, the Inner Cape, whatever. And I don't even really know where all those boundaries are. But I hear them a lot, and I think a lot of them are the same thing. What I will tell you is that the Cape, you could say, is becoming 2 capes, but it's really 15 capes. Even the differences between Wellfleet and Truro are real differences, and they need to be accounted for. And we have to find ways to provide incentives for these communities to collaborate. The Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative, which I had the opportunity to chair for the last 2 years, just issued a round of wastewater planning grants, $150,000. And the basic premise was that you had to cooperate with a neighboring community on a shared watershed. And so we are starting down that road to cooperate and look at the 15 different towns. So there'll be mapping, there'll be threshold flexibilities. In some of these areas that you will see when you see the map are somewhat discrete, there will be mitigation schedules. And that means you'll be able to look at a matrix that pretty much anyone who's been through 6th grade should be able to understand. And you'll be able to figure out before you talk to an architect or a lawyer, put a shovel in the ground, how much your development is going to cost if you do it in that area. And I think that is going to be a huge bonus. I spoke with Greg Bielecki. I know that the Secretary spoke earlier up there today, but Greg is the Secretary's expedited permitting czar statewide, implementing Chapter 43D. And he expresses some of the same frustrations statewide that are expressed here on the local level on the Cape, in that it takes 3 years to permit a project through the MEPA process. And it's for the basic fact that if you take a development and you land on a piece of property, and it's new, it's going to have an impact. And you have to measure that impact as it relates to water, wastewater, transportation, and rare and endangered species and other issues. And oftentimes those reviews are conducted by independent state agencies. And so you can see how the bureaucracy takes over and how you have to sort of hop around to different agencies and how it takes a long time to do that. So Greg's response is communities have to plan in the areas that they want development first. And so he would like to see that, and they would like to see mapping done statewide, although they've expressed a lot of hesitation about that because there are dangers in doing that. I feel that we are, as a region, ahead of the Cape and ahead of the state, and that we will remain so as we move forward with the mapping exercise, because we've already done it in Hyannis. And we did the growth incentive zone in Hyannis, and what that involved was that a town, from the top down, decided that it was going to work with everybody, and we were going to zone that, and we were going to look at the build-up, so that you didn't need to do it. You don't need to do a traffic study if you develop downtown. We know what the wastewater impacts are going to be and what the capacity is. We know what the water impacts are going to be, and that's why we were able to permit a mixed-use development on Center Street with 16 condominiums, 2 affordable units over 5 retail units in 6 weeks. So I think that's pretty quick. So expedited permitting can happen. What it requires is a commitment to planning by the local municipalities. They have to plan, they have to do the build-out, and they have to have the expertise to do that. We were lucky in Barnstable, when I was the assistant town manager there, that we had a growth management department that was some of the finest people I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And Ruth Weil, the director of growth management, is with us here today. And we were able to do that in large part because the town made a commitment to that resource, and we had fabulous people that were able to do that. Having left the town, I joked with some of my friends and left growth management, the people behind, and left Ruth. I've told people that I've come to the Cape Cod Commission and I've been forced to become ruthless, which is a line I stole from a good friend of mine and the dear departed Bob Smith, a former town attorney in the town of Barnstable, who had as much to do with our accomplishments in Hyannis as anyone else. So it takes a team. It takes a team of experts, I believe. And the one thing I can tell you about Barnstable is that it's unlike any of the other 15 towns in its size and its capacity. And so I think on the regional level, what we need to do at the Commission is we need to provide those services directly to towns. These are services that are not going to be covered by the existing tax bases in those towns. So in sort of changing the Commission from a reactive regulatory agency to a proactive planning agency, we have to be able to provide the same level of service that the Growth Management Department provided to the town of Barnstable to all 15 towns on Cape Cod. And that is what I will try to do as we move forward, is to provide those sort of resources. So those individual sort of supports for the local towns are important. And we'll be out there when we're talking to towns, because smart growth, although I don't really like the term that much, and I think it's overused and become cliched, but it is smart. And it's smart from a municipal perspective. And I'll tell you why. It's when you have 2-acre zoning and you're going to face some of the challenges we're going to face, like wastewater, you're going to be running a lot of pipe and not enough ratepayers and users on the pipe. And that is an expensive proposition. And you may say, okay, well, our Title V's are going to be sufficient. We don't ever have to worry about that. That is a perilous mistake to make. Ultimately, the courts will become involved in the wastewater situation on Cape Cod, and they will mandate a cleanup. And the only thing that I can tell you is that when the federal court steps in and tells you that you've got to pick it up, you've got to pick it up. And it's also going to be the most expensive option imaginable. So if we don't get our act in gear on the wastewater issue, and we don't plan for that appropriately up front and get that done right now, it won't be the least costly option to meet these total maximum daily limits. It will be the most costly option. And that has the potential to have a severe economic dislocation and dislocating effect on the local economy. So we have to plan for that. And I think from the Commission, what you'll see is that we will work closely with the Water Protection Collaborative, the Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative, and Andrew Gottlieb, the new executive director, interim executive director there, to finish the science, which is almost done, to have a model, an interactive model that we can use and provide services directly to all 15 towns, and to help them develop local wastewater plans, and to take it one step further, which is to help them figure out how much it's going to cost and how they're going to pay for it. And we're going to work with the collaborative to do that. So we're going to handle the wastewater problem. And as it relates to transportation, again, the Cape Cod Commission plays a major role as we staff the Metropolitan Planning Organization that really handles a lot of the federal funds that come in to the local area. And what we're going to do is coordinate that use. And we're going to coordinate transportation efforts. And we may have to make some roads bigger. I mean, there has been sort of a feeling a lot on the Cape, I think, that you can make roads bigger, you're just going to invite more development. If you put sewers in, you're just going to encourage more homes. There are more sophisticated ways around that with growth-neutral policies now. And we have a major project going right outside of this hotel right now in that Route 132 project. that some of you probably get caught up in. And it's only going to take 4 years to finish, so we're 25% of the way there. But that doesn't make sense unless we look and change the land use zoning around it. We can't continue the land use policies of highway business zones. They have got to stop. We cannot continue to confuse throughways and commercial districts. That encourages sprawl. It's the wrong thing to do. It just leads to more congestion, and there are better ways to do that. And Doug Storrs has sort of shown the way on how to do that. Well, it's a little bit close to the Rotary, but other than that, there are signalized entrances in there, and there aren't an excessive number of curb cuts, and we have to plan for that. So it's land use around that, but it's not just land use. We can't have Mass Highway come down and build roads that make Cape Cod look like any place else. So that's why we've pressed hard for a landscaping plan for this 132 project. That's why we've got approved an enhancement package and $1.5 million worth of landscaping that we'll have on top of that, because it is the gateway to Hyannis and should remain so. So underlying land use issues, and will continue to sort of be incorporated in our transportation planning. So it's transportation, it's wastewater. A lot of focus, and there was some discussion about open space upstairs. And it's not that open space is necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, or that we've got enough or we don't have enough. It depends where you have it, first of all. But perhaps there has been focus on open space as being a panacea for growth and development issues, and it certainly is not. What will become more important over the next 25 years is balancing what we put into this peninsula and what we take out of it. And so that will be the real key to a sustainable lifestyle and an increased quality of life on Cape Cod. So we'll be working with towns. Smart growth makes sense. And I can tell you that it makes sense from my Barnstable experience. Barnstable was recently upgraded with their bond rating to a AAA status by Standard & Poor's. And part of that listing, when they listed the reasons why, a lot of it has to do with it's a big town, it's got a big commercial base, we've got a lot of reserves. But in no small way were they complementary to the management structure in town, but also complementary to our growth incentive zone. And the fact that we had adopted a smart growth approach that had the potential to stimulate our tax base even in a down real estate market. So they like that. So it makes sense for communities to adopt these kind of principles. It's going to cost you less in the long run. And with the looming municipal issues that are out there, if you haven't read Commonwealth Magazine, or if you don't subscribe to it, they have an article this month that is entitled The Municipal Meltdown. And it's real, and it's happening, and a lot of it was mentioned upstairs. These little towns don't have enough of an economy of scale, especially with the real estate market flattening out the way that it has. And you're going to see problems in municipalities. It's not the problem that Chelsea had several years back that was isolated, and it's not in communities like Chelsea. You're going to see problems in municipalities like Saugus and West Boylston, and where they are really facing some difficult budget choices. I guess the good news on the Cape is the bad news. We get so little in state aid that perhaps it will be forestalled for a little bit. The town of Barnstable has a budget, including enterprise funds, of $140 million, and they receive on average, counting everything, local aid, school assistance, and all of that, probably about $10 million. So these local municipalities down here in the Cape Cod really support themselves for the most part. We are competitive, and we have been competitive in state grants and getting funding for youth and community centers and some of the other things, but that's about advocacy and effectiveness of our local elected officials. It's not about the fairness of any formula that comes down here. So we can't rely on the state to step in and bail us out. And we're going to be on our own, but we are on our own because we live on an island. And we've been on our own pretty much for 350 years. And especially as it relates to economic development, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you where the growth industries are going to be in 20 years. I can tell you that tourism is still going to be important. I can tell you that healthcare is going to matter for a long time. And I can tell you that the backbone of economic development on Cape Cod has for 350 years been farmers, fishermen, and then entrepreneurs. And that we have to support and find ways in our regulatory process to support small and locally owned businesses, because they are the backbone of economic development on Cape Cod. So we have to do that. We're not going to drag anybody over the bridge and turn any one of these towns into a company town. I mean, it's clearly not going to happen. It's not healthy. It's not a way to sort of succeed. It's not a way to ensure a healthier, sustainable community. Neither is an economic development plan that's built on an excessive number of curb cuts on a major highway and a proliferation of Dunkin' Donuts and drive-through McDonald's and CVS's and even in some cases big box stores either. We have to build the basis for an economy that matters and that is sustainable. And the clearest way that I can see to do that is really to look at what has sustained us for this long. So those are my thoughts, for the most part, on economic development. Other than some of the other challenges that were mentioned upstairs with I mean, Massachusetts is very different in this state, in this country. It's very different because of its history. But the grandfathering restrictions of local zoning and the conservative interpretation by the courts in this state makes zoning changes, if you can get them, almost irrelevant. So that's why they're difficult to get, and then when you get them, they really don't apply, at least for a very long time. And the other thing, when you look around the country, that you notice that's sort of shocking is their regionalism exists everywhere, it seems, except in Massachusetts. And zoning in other parts of the country is based on planning. But zoning in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is based on who owns the property. And that is the way that it has been. And it is a difficult thing to address. But we are fortunate to have an organization and legislation that provides a regional approach and some regional forethought. And I think a way to get at some of those issues regionally without having to go through the difficulties of a completely local process and explaining zoning to people that don't show up for the meetings, as was suggested earlier. So that is what you can expect from the Cape Cod Commission, as well as seeing a lot of me. I've been to Truro, Wellfleet, Orleans, Harwich twice, Yarmouth Board of Selectmen the day after I was appointed, and I've been in Mashpee too and talked to some folks in Bourne. And that's in 4 or 5 weeks. And it is the favorite part. It is, for me, the favorite part of my job. We have to be visible. We have to build external relationships. And I look forward to doing that. I would just close on the referencing sort of what we did in Hyannis from a process perspective. We had a very large table in the Selectmen's conference room that we had very smart people like Wendy sit around and said, hey, we've been talking about revitalizing Main Street for 30 years. How can we finally do it? And we came up with a 5-point plan that was a fabulous plan, brilliant plan. And we got blown up with it. We couldn't even get it to the town council. In part because it had a piece in it that nobody paid attention to, which was an adoption of the general laws that would allow a local community development board to take property by eminent domain and then sell it for private economic purposes to somebody else. So to take property from somebody and sell it to somebody we felt had more value to the community. And yeah, it's surprising that we missed that. But nobody's perfect. So eminent domain became the issue, and in the words of the day, and being a lawyer, I explained to the town manager at the time that in Latin, eminent domain meant that we needed a new town manager. So we dropped that. And a lot of people were dejected by that, but I was not. What we did in response to that was to try to build consensus around those areas we felt that we could. So we mass mailed to every resident in Hyannis. We had 7 meetings in the dead of winter, and we dragged people out, and we talked to hundreds of people, and we looked them in the eye, and we asked them, what's important to your community? What's important to you? And shockingly enough, a lot of what we had suggested is a lot of what they wanted. But they hadn't been included in the process, and they hadn't been talked to directly about those issues. And that's the kind of tough, sort of rolling up your sleeves kind of civic engagement you need to do in order to be successful when you want to do things like change zoning. That became my favorite part of the job. So we called them visioning sessions. They were really more listening sessions. We wound up with an ordinance that was much better than the one that we had proposed. And it became my favorite part of the job, and I love to go out to we exported those to the other 6 villages in town. And so I hope that we're going to take the same approach at the Commission. I guess since I'm in charge, I can say we are going to take the same approach at the Commission. And we're going to take this on the road, and you're going to see a lot of us. And it will take a little bit of time for things to change, but hopefully it won't take that long, and we'll be talking about some new and exciting approaches to managing growth and development on Cape Cod. So thank you very much for your patience.
I want to thank Paul, but we do have just time for 1 or 2 questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? Even though I know it's nap time. No? Mr. Zam.
The question you would put to the panel is what you would do next to solve all the problems. What do you think you could do?
Would you repeat the question, please?
The question is, what would we do to solve all the problems we heard upstairs?
What do you think our next step is?
Yeah, the next step from our perspective is to roll out the recommendations of the 21st Century Task Force, because I think they encompass a lot of the issues that are up there. I think we can, without the difficulties of changing local zoning, I think we can change local behavior. I think we can change through the manipulation of thresholds where we have development and where we don't want development. And I think we can work more cooperatively with municipalities to make sure that they have plans that make sense. We want them to have local comprehensive plans that aren't just doorstops, but are actually marbled into their capital plans and become real work plans for their departments. And we want those local comprehensive plans to fit into our regional policy plan, which we have to redo. And that's one of the things that we have to do. I think our regional policy plan reads well as a practitioner's manual for lawyers representing people in front of the Cape Cod Commission. But since that's primarily just Pat Butler and Mike Ford, I think the regional policy plan should probably serve the 240,000 people rather than just 2. So we're going to try to make it more understandable.
Anybody else? Thank you, Paul. I want to thank all of you for attending today. Obviously, we've got our work cut out for us. Our goal is economic survival, and that economic survival is going to depend on our demographic balance and how we enable our growth and do it in a smart way. So we're going to need all of you to help. We're going to hope to be back to you soon with some next steps. And if you missed any part of today, you'll see it soon on public access TV. But thank you all. Thank you, Cape Cod Bucks and Savings Bank, IFA, Cape Cod Times, and all of our collaborators. Thank you for being here. And those of you that we've invited to our private meeting with Mr. Francis, we will do that in the Nauset room, and that will start in a few moments. Thank you. To learn more about the information presented at the Economic Summit, visit the Cape Cod Chamber website at ecapechamber.com and click on our resource directory. Get involved in your town's financial well-being and share this information with others. The economic health of our children's future is at stake.